Thank you, Jenny. I appreciate it. And thank you to all of our participants for being here today. I am really excited that you've all joined us. My name is Scott Maitland. As Jenny said, I'm the Chief of Staff for the Department of Local Government Finance. Today's webinar is a little bit different than our standard format, but I'm excited to introduce Megan Compton and Jim Sparks, the state of Indiana's current and former geographic information officers, respectively. Commissioner Bennett and I are really excited that they've agreed to talk with you today because the Indiana Geographic Information Office works on problems every day that touch almost every facet of local government. Those of you joining us today from county government might know this already, or maybe some of our larger cities and towns that have their own GIS systems. But GIS really crosses all of the issues that many of you face every day, from planning and development to emergency services, taxes, and everything in between. The IGIO is really committed to creating tools and sharing data that really enable governments to serve their constituents better. The department has really been working with Megan and her team for some time now to beef up the data sharing we do here at the state level, and starting to build tools that we can utilize in order to meet some of our transparency goals at the department. Today, though, I want Megan and Jim to share with you what their office works on every day, how it impacts all of you, and really why you should care about GIS in your local communities. I would highly recommend you guys ask these two experts any questions that you have. They're fantastic. You will really enjoy both of them in this presentation. So Megan and Jim, thank you again, both of you, for being here, and take it away.
All right, Scott, thank you so much. Can you all hear me okay? Jenny, Scott? Yep, Jim, thanks. All right, the head nod works. Okay, good afternoon. Thank you for the introduction, Scott. It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon, and thank you all for taking your time to join us. So I'll share a slide. As Scott said, my name is Megan Compton. I'm our State's Geographic Information Officer. It's a little bit of a bio about me, also a bio about Jim. You can read that, but what I want to tell you is that Jim and I have worked together for a number of years. I've had the opportunity to follow in his footsteps as the first GIO, and now as in this iteration of our office, we continue to develop our infrastructure and the architecture on the internal state side to manage, maintain, and support the growth of geospatial data to change and inform policy, help support agencies. And we'll tell you a lot about how that works today in our webinar. And Jim, do you want to say a few words to introduce yourself?
Sure. Hello, everybody. I think probably the most important thing I can tell you about me and how that relates to GIS is that I've always had a love of maps, and there's a really close tie between GIS and maps. So I was the nerdy grade school kid that would run into the gas station back in the day when we could do that and come out with a handful of street maps. And I had one whole wall of my bedroom that was covered by those street maps. So it's just interesting how life works out sometimes. So that love of maps translated later on into lots of ways to deal with spatial or geographic data, including working on a survey team, cartographer. I was a county cartographer for Ozaukee County in Wisconsin, so I was able to work at the county level then, and doing consulting in the private sector. So all that set me up very well for where I am today, because that county government experience, state government experience, worked in higher ed over at the Polis Center on IUPUI's campus, and many years in the private sector. So glad I'm here today, and looking forward to some of your questions and interaction as we go along.
Jim, thank you. So Jim was our GIO, our state GIO, for 10 years, and I've been in the role now for the last 4 years. My state government experience has been with the state for 14 years, mostly working in the public safety sector, and now taking a very similar love of maps. I was that kid in the backseat of the car with the atlas, highlighting the route that we would take to the place. And now it's really fun. I have 2 small children, and it's fun because we learn our cardinal directions before we learned our left and right. So that was Just kind of a different way that maybe if you're kind of a map head, you might think of things a little bit differently. But I hope we have some fellow map heads on the line today. And if you're not already, then you're about to learn a whole lot about GIS and maps. So with that, Jim, I'm going to send it over to you to talk about what is GIS.
Sure, thanks, Megan. So I'm going to look out in the audience and please raise your hands if you are a GIS expert. Okay, so it looks like 4 of you. So you 4 can take a nap during the next 3 or 4 slides, but hopefully the rest of you will learn a little bit about what this GIS stuff. It's not goats in space. So if you raised your hand and that's what you thought it was, this is something else. It's a way of modeling the real world and doing it in a digital environment that we can share, that we can all contribute to and take away from. So we do that by building these slices of the real world, these data slices, like aerial photography. That's what we call imagery, but you may know it better as aerial photography. LiDAR that we're going to talk about here in a little bit is elevation data. Transportation, like those road maps that I used to collect. All the other things that you see here listed are, and many more. There's hundreds and hundreds of these data slices that we work with, but together they kind of stack up in the right place on top of each other, and we can pick and choose which ones we want to work with and see and analyze at any given time. And all that gets us to the point where we can ask where questions, W-H-E-R-E, where questions like. Slide change. There we go. Like, where in Indiana do we have hazardous weather conditions that maybe we would want to find out about before we took a trip anywhere across the state or outside of the state? Where in Indiana would be a great place for standing up a new Honda plant? That was a real question that was asked back in June of 2006. And Indiana was in a fortunate situation to be able to answer that question very well. And part of that answer had to do with where questions like, where is a potential workforce? What is the education level of that workforce? Where are there utilities? Where are there parcels that meet our needs? Or in the fall of 2002, you might remember we had some tornadoes sweep through the state, affected 32 counties. So where should responders focus their efforts across Indiana in response to that tornado damage? These are all where questions that GIS helps with. Next slide. So given all of that, we can come up with, I think, a decent definition for what is GIS. It's a system that lets us view, understand, question, interpret, and visualize data in lots and lots of different ways. And, you know, the old saying, a picture is worth 1,000 words, it comes into play here because you can see patterns that you didn't know existed when you were just looking at databases and rows and columns of data. But
Jim, I think we lost you for a moment.
Okay.
Oh, no, now you're back. Yeah,
okay,
you're back
great.
now.
We take that geospatial data and we produce all kinds of different maps. We can do 3D things so that we can look at it as a globe, the world, the earth, lots of reports, charts, but it all starts with that geographic information data. So Indiana has a long tradition of using geographic information systems. It started back in the late 70s and early 1980s, at least the parts that I know about. And a lot of that happened early on in universities across the state. Also, the private sector started picking up on GIS because they understood its value and what kind of information they could get to help their business grow. But also local governments, cities, counties, and the state, especially in the mid 1980s, were all starting to work with geographic information. And one of the things that we all understood early on is that it took a lot of effort to create and maintain geospatial data. And if everybody was creating and maintaining the same or similar data sets, it seems like it's kind of a redundant effort and wasted time and wasted tax dollars. So our legislators came together and put some language into state statute. July 1st, 2007 is when it actually became state statute. It's IC 4-23-7.3. So Megan's job is actually codified. That used to keep me up at night because everybody could see what it was I was supposed to do. Don't know if that bothers Megan or not, but all the responsibilities are listed in that code. And it helps everybody be very transparent about what the GIO is supposed to do in the state of Indiana. Next slide.
All right, I'll get the buttons right. Okay, so as Jim mentioned, the Indiana Code really does drive what our office is supposed to do. We're driven by two things, really. We're driven by the state statute, but we're also very heavily driven by what those community mapping priorities are. And so we do a lot of listening. We do a lot of outreach and communication with those communities, but we'll talk about that in a little bit. Our coordination responsibilities for GIS goes across the entire state, and actually to the local level, state level, and national level. Our responsibilities go kind of on those three different tiers. We take data that we find and we integrate those data sets as far as possible and make them available by distributing them open to the public. We serve state agencies and other partners as Geographic Information Officer to establish priorities, establish strategies, set the vision, chart the course for the state's geospatial efforts. We'll talk about some of those programs here in just a minute. And where we need to, where we find gaps, we have an opportunity to create new data if we need to. I'll use one example of that. Something that we didn't talk about 10 years ago was building footprints. And any of you that work in local government, building and planning, understanding the spaces that you have available. And we work to create a data set of building footprints now. So where that data is lacking, we can either help create it through our office or encourage the experts that do know how to do those data sets to help to create those. And if there's a gap there, we can help facilitate the data sharing across those organizations so that that data gets distributed as far as it possibly needs to go. Those are just a few of our responsibilities. Excuse me one second. Sorry. We also have several partners that help us reach and achieve what we're responsible for doing. We work very closely with our state's, the Indiana Geographic Information Council. That's a set of GIS experts from across the state, across all different sectors, who come together and serve on several committees that help us set priorities, design requests for proposals if we need to contract for work. So those are a lot of additional partners also at the federal level that help us through data workflows. They can help us establish those or understand those national priorities that will then trickle down to the states. One example of that for this group might be broadband and how the national level establishes what the workflow is going to look like or what we expect that broadband fabric to be across the entire state or across the entire nation. How do we connect everybody? Those priorities then trickle down to the state, and our office is helpful in helping state agencies to work through or understand what data sets they might need to help inform those particular policies. Okay. Something else I want to mention when we talk about creating new data sets, we do have a build it once, use it many times philosophy. And we'll talk about that with one of our major projects that we have. The build it once, use it many times philosophy just means we want to create data sets that can be utilized by everyone in as broad a spectrum as possible. So folks can add in whatever information they need to make sense for their business workflows, but the basic data sets and characteristics of that GIS data is well established with standards and things that make it authoritative. So some of the projects that we work on across the state that I'll go into and talk about today, we have imagery, aerial photography. We also have lidar, which is elevation data. We, in both cases, we work with vendors and work with multiple state agencies to accomplish these projects. We have our Indiana map, which is our open data portal. I mentioned our collaboration with our Indiana Geographic Information Council. And we also focus heavily on our state's GIS data harvest program. So I'll talk a little bit first about ortho imagery and lidar programs. So from base maps to all the environmental applications for waterways, floodplains, transportation hubs, and roadways, economic development and all of those sorts of things rely on the state's imagery and elevation data. The collection of this data is supported by the Geographic Information Office team and help with our Indiana Office of Technology and our Indiana Department of Transportation, with partners within all of the different sectors to be sure that we understand what the priorities are. So we fly the state in the ortho imagery. Let me describe the programs just very quickly. Ortho imagery and lidar programs involve our office helping to support programs that will fly the state. So we're talking about aircraft that fly at a decent altitude, but they take high resolution pictures of the ground. Think something about the resolution about the size of a manhole cover. It's very high resolution. We call it 6-inch imagery. It's also 4-band imagery. 4-band means that it has a red, green, blue that we understand about 3-band, but the near infrared is what allows us to do floodplain management, for example. So we understand where water exists. And the lidar imagery, the picture you see on the right-hand side of your screen right now, that's the elevation data. So similar strategy with the airplane, but in this case, instead of taking high resolution pictures, they're using lasers to identify the elevation of the ground. So that helps us a lot. I mentioned building footprints earlier. These two data sets combined together help us to create those building footprints. Extremely helpful lately when it comes to floodplain management, when it comes to hazard mitigation, all of those things that really affect our local communities, especially in the state of Indiana, where we have a lot of flooding. And that's one of our number one challenges as far as natural disasters. Another one of our really important projects it has taken center stage here in the last probably 6 to 8 months. For the last 2 decades, the state has established a program that we now call Indiana Map. It wasn't always called Indiana Map, but that is what we call it today. It is our open data hub. And even though it has had various names and different support structures, it allows the availability of data in one place for public use as much as needed. One of the reasons why we're focused on Indiana Map is because we have a very active and interested GIS community. They're used to having the data available. So the impact to our state and having open data is substantial. What the examples that Jim mentioned, and then even further, we have a lot of other communities that are interested in ideas, and we have the ability to make popular maps and applications that help showcase within this environment. The QR code that you can see on your screen now can get you directly to Indiana Map. And I want to talk a little bit about one of the functions of the new version of Indiana Map, if you will. We've partnered now for the last several decades with the Indiana University Geological and Water Survey. And most recently, this map has made its way into our office, allowing us to apply some new technology and new ways in order to enable that sharing and enable folks to, even if you're not that map expert, to utilize the data sets that are out there and available to you. So question might come up, who can make a map? And I want to take a minute and just show you how you can do this on your own. So I'm going to jump over to another screen. we are. Okay. So this is our Indiana map. This is the place for all of Indiana geospatial information. So not only are we able to show our maps here, but we're also able to show a lot of the popular apps and resources. So I'll scroll down here really quickly to show you areas where you can find things that might be of interest to you. So most recently, after the census, before the primary election, we had a lot of folks interested in who are your elected officials. Well, we have an application shown here through one of our partners that displays the data that came directly from the census, made its way through the legislature, throughout several of your communities to help establish those boundaries. And now you can utilize that application. So we highlighted it here just as an example. I'll scroll down a little bit further. We have what we call data categories. If you're thinking about a data set that you might be interested in, you can type a keyword here. Maybe you're interested in seeing parcels. If you want to see a set of parcel data, we can pull up the most recent set of parcels viewable on the map. This data set, as you might imagine, is quite large. So we're going to zoom in. And here we have brought up all of the different parcels. And these parcel IDs are connected, and behind the scenes, all of the data is also there as well. We can download this data set if we're interested in several different formats. So if you want to work with it in your own environment, or if you just want to view it in an Excel spreadsheet, you can do that. So I won't go into too much detail here, but I'll go back here to our home screen. I'm going to scroll back down through our data categories so you can search those data categories if you're interested in doing that, if you don't want to use the keyword search. We'll also share here some really great things that are coming in Indiana GIS in the news. How are we supporting things? We have our state GIS day that's coming up in November. We highlight that here. We also highlight, I mentioned broadband earlier, very important topic for government right now, and very important topic for every level of government, from federal down to local level. So we have our broadband availability map that's shown here. So those are just some of the things that we promote through the Indiana map. So it's more than just maps, it's more than just data. It's the ability to create an application. It's the ability to create your own map if you want to. We also have areas where you can find and follow. If you are interested, I would encourage you to sign in or sign up to follow the initiatives. So if you click on follow the initiative, a pop-up screen will happen. I hope you guys can see my pop-up. Not sure you can, but if you click,
Megan, I don't see the pop-up.
Okay, all right. Well, in the pop-up screen, see if I can change the way that I'm sharing this, and that might work. There we go. You should be able to see the pop-up. So this right here, you can sign in if you have an existing what we call ArcGIS online login. If you don't, you can sign in with Apple, Google, Facebook, or GitHub. And if you don't have an account, you can create an Indiana Map community account. So I said, who can make a map? And the answer is anybody can make a map. So you can create your own account, and at no cost, for no challenges, you can create your own account, save your maps, work on things, share. You can log on, add in your data, create your map, export things, print, and share out that map to anybody who wants to see it. The goal here is to really break down those walls that keep us from sharing information and help us utilize maps to make really smart decisions and convey a lot of information. Like Jim said, a picture says 1,000 words. I'd like to think a map says 10,000 words. We can show such different information just by utilizing some data. Once you have your map, your account established, if you have other data, you can also bring in your data into those mapping things. We host several how-to videos and webinars both through our council, but also through our office, on how to utilize the map for any level of user. If you're interested in that, I encourage you to follow the initiative. Like I mentioned, create your account. You will be notified when we have those events. And also, you can feel free to send me an email. We'll share our contact. In case you didn't notice, I really do love talking about Indiana Map. Okay. Another program that's really critical and near and dear to our hearts is the Indiana Data Harvest Program. So the image that you see here is the Data Harvest dashboard. I want to start by saying thank you to all of the counties that are on the line and all the municipalities, everybody who contributes their data to Indiana Map by participating. Again, this build it once, use it many times philosophy is absolutely present here. The impact of the data sets that we collect to state and local government are exponentially exponential. As we continue down the path of maturing this program, we allow new projects to happen. So a little bit about the program. We collect addresses, road center lines, parcels, and government boundaries. And those government boundaries, there's a lot of them, but we work with the communities to understand what data sets you have so that we can build those local data sets. So think townships, municipal boundaries, different districts that might be of interest, school districts, for example, forest districts, and we bring those data sets together and we homogenize them. We make them very, very standardized as much as possible, not making major changes, just working them into what we call a data schema. So we collect the data from every county once a year. That project is actually getting ready to kick off August 1st. And we are collecting data on a voluntary basis from every single county. This partnership has been building since this office was established. And we've seen a lot of participation, a lot of growth, and a lot of interest in these data sets over the years in several conversations, like Scott mentioned in the beginning, how we can communicate and work with state agencies like DLGF and other entities to pull in those data sets and utilize them to the best available to make them the most well utilized, but also understanding the use cases of those agencies that we are helping to support. The data that are created and shared here and curated here are also then shared out to Indiana Map. So the same parcel data that you see shown on this image is the data I just showed you on Indiana Map from 2001. So as soon as we finish it, we put it out on Indiana Map and anybody can utilize it. So just a little bit about how that data gets used. We pull these data sets in for urban planning. Absolutely huge amount of information shared with our Department of Health, local health departments as well, to understand where things were happening during COVID, how we can get resources out to folks. Everything has that where component. Where are the people? Where are the resources? Where do we need to get it to? Supporting all sorts of government operations, including natural resources, Department of Agriculture, and local agriculture extensions across the state are huge contributors, and also on a knowledge base for helping us understand what data sets are necessary in order for them to move their businesses forward. So building from the statute that outlines the Geographic Information Office's duties, we get to work with these different agencies in supporting the major projects that impact all of you. There we go. Sorry, my screen blinked for just a second. So we are able to support this with the help of all of the county GIS folks that help contribute data to our office through the annual data harvest program. So again, thank you for your participation in that, but we couldn't do it without these folks. So if you're from county government or even municipal government and you want to know who in your county helps coordinate the GIS, we have created a map that allows that we keep up to date as much as possible all of the county GIS contacts that we work with. So again, this QR code here will launch this map, and we'll share some of these out at the end of the presentation too. So this map, if you click on the QR code, go to the map, you can click on the map interactively and it'll bring up who that county GIS contact is. So if you happen to be looking for a particular data set, We always say it's best to go directly to the source. And for many cases, that source is the county. So we want to make that available to you. In the future, we will be expanding this map to include not only county GIS contacts, but also municipal GIS contacts. And we have some ideas and requests to expand it into universities and other institutions that maintain their own GIS data. So we hope to continue and expand this project out as far as it can be very helpful.
Well, thank you, Megan and Jim, for giving us this presentation. We don't have any questions right now. Did you have anything else you wanted to share before we pass it over to Wes?
Yep, I would like for Jim to pick it up here and talk about what our framework data improvement project is.
Sorry, go ahead.
Okay, and I think I'm unmuted, so let's move ahead here. So Megan talked about the data harvest project. We also sometimes call it the data sharing project, because that's really what it's about, is sharing these important geospatial data sets. We are just kicking off a pilot project that's going to streamline how the data moves from the counties into a processing box so that we can review the data and improve it, and eventually end up with the best data we can get, and so it can be available for a variety of different solutions that Megan's been talking about. So for this pilot, we will be inviting 5 counties from around the state, so just a subset of the 92, so that it will be a manageable amount of data. And in the past, we will be replacing what we've been doing in the past, which is really labor-intensive data manipulation to look at where fields are blank, or perhaps the information for a street suffix, for example, was something that wasn't standard. So we could key on that and improve the data, put in the standard suffix so that it would be more standardized as a data set, and therefore more useful in applications downstream. Lots and lots of time once the data was delivered to look at it, improve it, and then put it back into the Indiana map. So what this pilot is about is using some business rules based software to do that inspection and to find areas of concern, and many times to be able to apply a fix on the fly. At the very least, it will cut down on the amount of inspection that we have to do to identify some deficiencies. And whatever it finds, it's going to report that out. It's going to be really useful information for lots of folks, including the data stewards at the county level. If they want to look and see where maybe they could improve some of the standardizations for those street suffixes, or make sure that all the address fields are, say, zip code fields are complete, then they won't have the burden of that inspection either. They can just look at the report and go straight to it. So after the data has been reviewed and processed and improved, then it will come back out to that Indiana map site that that Megan has shown you. This process, we think, is going to take several weeks, 3 or 4 months, and we are looking forward to getting started. We're waiting right now on the delivery of that software that I was talking about, and we plan to invite the 5 counties for the pilot into the project, and then we'll be on our way and hopefully move through this fairly quickly. Next slide. But what happens after that? Well, so we're going to look long and hard at the processes, which I expect will go through several improvements even through the pilot project. But we anticipate that we're going to learn a lot about the data and also the tools that we're using to improve the data and the transfer flow, any number of things that are part of that data improvement process. And we want to see if, before we move to all 92 counties if there's some efficiencies that we can gain just in the process itself. So conclude the project and review the processes, and then where to from there, Megan?
So after we go through and review all this processes and understand a lot of the nuances of the data that we're still trying to unfold, again, the data harvest isn't a new project. We've been working on this since 2008, and it's just kind of continued to grow. And every year we learn something a little bit new. So we anticipate that going through this new process of cleaning up these data in a way that improves the county's data, instead of just us and changing the data sets, you're really working on that local data to keep it really high accuracy for the future as well. So we're going to take what we learned from the pilot and apply it to our statewide data harvest program that I mentioned. So every year when we collect these data sets, we'll do so in a more efficient way. We'll do so in a way that allows that for that data cleanup. So we'll really just launch the Framework Data Improvement Program for all 92 counties, based and building on what we learned from those 5 counties. Okay, so with that, we're going to end here. For those of you interested and want to have a connection back to that Indiana Map Open Data Platform that we mentioned, in case you missed the QR code on a previous screen, you can grab it right here. There's a link to our website, as well as my contact information and Jim's contact information. So with that, Jenny, I'll pass it back over to you. Do we have any questions?
I might
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jim.
Go ahead, Jim.
If I could take just a second, I don't think I mentioned this, but it's so important to that pilot project that we are working in tandem with DLGF, and that's really the tie that brought us here today, is this pilot project. So thanks very much to all the folks involved with it from the DLGF side, and looking forward to seeing this really improve the process and the resulting data.
Thank you, Megan and Jim. I'm going to turn it over. Our commissioner is here and let him wrap us up. But I did want to just remind everybody that we will be sending out the email that will have the video, the presentation, as well as the survey and the CE form. And so just watch for those. We do have our next webinar in August, and that's going to cover 1782 notices. So if you haven't already signed up, you'll want to sign up for that one. It will be in our weekly emails as well as on the webinar website. And we did have a question that did pop up for Megan and or Jim, and wanted to know if you have selected the 5 counties for, I believe, for the pilot project.
Yes, so we have a list of counties that we are going to reach out to, and as soon as we're ready as part of the project, planning through that technology that Jim talked about, we'll be reaching out to those counties very soon. So yes and no, Jenny.
Great, wonderful, thank you. If there's any other questions, you can enter them into the chat box after I pass this off to Wes, and we will get those over to Megan and Jim for a response. So please feel free to contact them directly, or you can enter them in the chat box here after we wrap up. But I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Commissioner Bennett. Wes?
Hi, Jenny. Thank you. Hi, Megan. Jim, how are you?
Hey, Wes, it's good to see you.
Good to see you too. And we're certainly, Jim, how you been?
Doing great. It's been a while, so
It has
good to see you.
You too, sir. Thank you for being here today. We were certainly very pleased to share this time on this important initiative. I've had some experience with GIS in my former life and at the town of Plainfield, and it has done tremendous things for the town of Plainfield, for Avon, for all of Hendricks County over the course of the last 15 years. So I would encourage my friends at the local units of government, whether you be a library or a township or a city or town, it doesn't matter. Get plugged into your local GIS county administrator, whatever their title is, get plugged into them, because they will help you provide services in a more efficient and effective manner to your citizens, and not only your citizens, but your businesses as well. So Megan, congratulations on outstanding work, and we're certainly very pleased to be a partner, one of many of your partners that you know, Jim set you up for success, and you're carrying the ball, and you both are doing outstanding work, and we're glad to be a partner in that endeavor. So anytime you need help from DLGF, you just give us a call.
Les, thank you. You guys have been absolutely instrumental. We've been talking about how to improve some of this data with the state now for about 3 years or more, just actively since I've been in this role, but for a long time before that too, right? So thank you guys for your support. And you've given us a really good insight into how these data sets can and could be used, and how we can all learn from each other. So really appreciate the opportunity and the collaboration. It's a really good example of good government.
Yeah, and I just give a couple quick examples. That we've got a little bit of a time here, and we might get some other questions, but we in the town and our engineering department and Tim Belcher with the town has done a remarkable job with Snyder and them doing this. But manhole covers, fire hydrants, light poles, traffic signals, EMS, anything public safety, multiple things public safety for your firemen, your policemen, and EMS, along with your 911 folks. And that's where Jim and I first met, was on our work with the 911 board. So this is this GIS is critical to public safety, and it's critical to delivering the best quality of service that we can to our citizens and to our businesses. So just a couple quick things that we do. I mean, the boundaries for precincts, the boundaries for wards, the boundaries, all sorts of boundaries. And I love maps, so I'm really anxious to get into your into all the maps. So I'll try not to print them all off, Jenny, but the maps are remarkable. So great work, everyone.
That was well said, and I think we started this presentation by saying that GIS helps us answer where questions, but the fact is that everything that happens somewhere, right? So
there you go.
You got a choice. You can either look at a database with rows and columns, or you can look at it and see where it exists and where things around it exist, so that you can understand patterns.
In color.
Yes, very helpful.
Color.
Absolutely.
Yeah, zoning, all sorts of uses for zoning, planning and zoning, redevelopment, et cetera. So and the schools can use it as well. Bus routes, you know, just all, it's unlimited, the amount of data or the usage that's out there for GIS.
The other thing I would like to add here is that Indiana is a national leader in GIS. Megan and her office and the work that Jim has put in have been nationally recognized for their work on the data harvest, as well as other things. We can continue that with your help, and your communities can be part of that effort as well. And we really hope that they can be. So thank you again for Megan and Jim, and for Commissioner Bennett, your kind words as well. It's been a fantastic. I'll echo Sherry's comment in the Q&A here. Just a fantastic webinar. Thank you both.
You're quite welcome.
And Jenny, this will be posted on our website too, right?
Yes,
So
we did actually have a couple. We had a question that came up, which would be for Megan and Jim. How do counties know when the latest satellite imagery is available for import into their GIS systems?
Sure. So I'll take that question. One of the things I would encourage you to do is to follow the initiative on the Indiana map that I mentioned. You will get notification when those data sets are published. We go into a lot of, we fly the state roughly every 4 years on a rotating basis, and we collect county imagery in sets in what we call tiers. We collect the center part of the state, then the eastern part of the state, and then the western part of the state. So our most recent imagery that's available is for the center tier of the state, and that was flown last year in 2021. 2022, we just finished the collection a few months ago of the imagery on the eastern side of the state. So as that data is made available, we do publish it. We set it out available for image services, and if I can on this webinar find the link to the image service, I'll publish it here. If you have specific questions about imagery, please reach out to our office. I will connect you with the manager who runs that program and is extremely passionate about it. We can work with you to help you figure out how to pull that into your system, depending on what systems that you're using, and visualize it through what we call a REST service, or access the service so you don't have to download the imagery.
I might add also that Megan's office puts on regional presentations about that project. You've done some of those for this latest iteration, and I'm sure we'll do some more. And Scott, you had mentioned Indiana's prominence in the geospatial sphere. It's interesting to think that some states don't have a statewide orthoimagery or aerial photography program yet. And Megan has just started on our 4th statewide orthoimagery program. So I just think that's wonderful. Every once in a while we'll have someone say, but we've got Google. What do we need orthoimagery for? Well, there's some really good answers to that. For one thing, if you want to find out something about the data, good luck calling Google. They don't really publish the metadata about it. It's certainly not in the way that Megan's office does. So if you want to know the date flown, the process used, the accuracy, the monumentation and control, all of those kinds of things are available as part of the data set. In addition, Google likes pretty pictures. So they want full green trees. You know, all the leaves are out, but the imagery that Megan's office collects is leaf off so that you can see what's under the trees. And that's important for all kinds of applications that we've talked about, not the least of which is emergency response.
Thank you, Jim. That's very true. I personally live in a very wooded area. So if you look at Google imagery, you can't even see my house. Or half of the neighborhood. So if you're doing things that local government needs to do for assessment or for drainage, I know the surveyors, we have a lot of water issues in our area. Surveyors are out here frequently, and if they were just using leaf-on imagery or just an open source imagery instead of utilizing the stuff the state uses, they wouldn't tell them very much. So being able to pull that data in really prevents you having from doing a lot of field verification. And you can actually just utilize it and learn a lot of things from the imagery itself before you hit the field.
Megan, can I ask a question real quick? If a county, I know Hendricks County, I think flies every 2 years. Are those pictures or is that pictometry available? Can they share that with you, or would you accept that from them?
Sure, great question. So, and Sean on our team, you'd make his face light up when you talk about this, but he's working on what we call the best available set of data layers. So Hendricks County is not alone. Many counties fly what we would call off cycle. So sometimes they'll fly and choose to utilize the imagery that we collect. I didn't mention this before, but you also, for Hendricks County's example, which we flew that county in 2021, if that county wanted to, instead of having 6-inch imagery, have 3-inch imagery, they can do what we call buy up. So the state pays for the 6-inch imagery for the county, but they can pay the difference to increase it to a 3-inch imagery resolution, which is amazing, absolutely amazing. Imagery. And then it's a fraction of the cost. So the state's doing a cost share. And if you purchase through their state program, it is all open data. So we share it out to everybody, right? We put it out on the web, like I mentioned earlier, the imagery service. If Hendricks County wants to share their data with us, we are absolutely happy to take it and tie it into that best available. Mm-hmm. Depending on who they had as their contractor for the flight, that might be what we call licensed data. And that's something to consider. So sometimes they're not allowed to share it.
Okay.
So the short answer is it depends. That was a little bit of a longer answer. And if there's somebody who specifically has a question, you'll know if you require a login, perhaps to your data. Probably isn't open data, but if it is, we are happy to help display it and pull it into our best available map.
Do you keep historical flyover data? In other words, I think Hendricks County has three flyovers going back. Do you do the same thing?
Absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
So we maintain older data, and which is really neat to do. Depending on how you're going to utilize your map, you can actually do what we call a slider bar, and you can put it in, and you can pull in your old imagery and your new imagery, and then slide that bar back and forth so you can see really interactive what the changes are over time. Really interesting in a county like Hendricks that has a lot of development.
And in fact, Indiana Department of Transportation flew counties worth of imagery back in the day. I'm talking 50s and 60s and 70s. And they still have the canisters of film that those images were captured on. And over time, as kind of I've got a little extra time, sort of a project, they scan those images in so that they become digital. So they digitize them. And then I know some summers they've had interns working on taking those images and moving them digitally into close to the right place on Earth so that they can be viewed with all those other slices of data that I talked about a while ago. So thanks, INDOT, wherever you are, and that's a pretty cool resource too.
The technology is remarkable.
Always changing.
Yeah.
Well, I think that wraps up then today. As Megan and Jim said, if you have additional questions, you can reach out to them directly. We'll have their contact information along with the PowerPoint and the video posted on the website, so you'll be able to follow up with them. But we do appreciate everybody participating today, and please join us next month for our 1782 notice webinar. Thank you guys, and have a great day.
Thanks, Megan. Thanks, Jim.
Welcome.
Thank you.